There's a saying on Wall Street, sell in May and go away, but does that actually work? Well, according to a study by Bank of America, 8 of the last 10 years, the stock market actually was positive 4% during the May through October time period, and especially in this case, where we saw such a strong sell-off in April, I think it's buy the fear in May rather than sell in May. April, we saw about a 5% drawdown and sell-off in the S&P 500, and there was a lot of fear if the Fed might bring rate hikes back on the table, but in Jerome Powell's press conference last week, he made that seem like that's very unlikely, and there's a high bar for that to happen, which is leading to the market's rally so far over the past week. The S&P 500 was up for the past 4 days and is now at 5,200, which is up 5%. From its lows, and this shows the momentum that we have in this market. And then I wanted to also talk about Stanley Druckenmiller's interview with CNBC this morning. He said that the amount of spending we're doing for both monetary policy as well as government spending, it's like spending like we're in a depression and we're in an economic expansion, which could add fuel to the fire in terms of inflation. So he was just giving some alarm bells about that. Stanley Druckenmiller is a Bitcoin investor. Stanley Druckenmiller also said that the Federal Reserve talks too much and offers too much forward guidance, which can ultimately leave the Federal Reserve in a hole and can make mistakes. And I kind of agree. I think the Federal Reserve should be a little more strategic in its thinking, and because the data does change month to month, and you don't want to have to be in a situation where you say one thing one month, and if the data accelerates another month, change your tune. You want to be a little bit more well anchored in terms of your guidance. And Mohamed El-Erian, an economist for Alliance, also said a similar thing. So that's something we have to keep in mind. And look, as I said earlier, Stanley Druckenmiller is a Bitcoin investor, and there's a lot of tailwinds for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's 200-day moving average is at an all-time high. It's trading sideways right now, but the Hong Kong spot Bitcoin ETFs that were approved, rumors are likely that mainland China will allow trading of that. South Korea just approved spot Bitcoin ETFs to be slated for approval for June. So there's a lot of tailwinds coming up for Bitcoin. Yes, we did see a Wells notice for Robinhood from the SEC, but the SEC's regulation by enforcement is not necessarily the best approach. We need a clear regulatory roadmap for the SEC to work with crypto companies so that we could foster this innovation in the U.S. Obviously, this is similar to what happened with Coinbase, and I'm sure Robinhood, and they said that they'll likely go to court with the SEC over this, and we'll see who wins. The SEC has won some cases, but they also have lost some cases. So we'll see how that goes. And I also wanted to touch briefly on Palantir earnings. Their earnings and revenue crushed expectations, and their guidance was great. Just their stock was down today. And I think the reason this happened was the stock was up so much the last week. There was so much, the expectations were so high that it was almost impossible for the stock to meet. And now the stock and the fundamentals just have to catch up with the valuation Palantir has. But don't get me wrong, Palantir is a great company, and I think will ultimately grow into their valuation even more. This is kind of the opposite of what happened to Tesla earnings the other week. There was such a low bar and low expectations for Tesla. The stock surged because the expectations were so low. So the worst case scenario in terms of fears were kind of already priced into Tesla, so there was only room to go higher from there in terms of like a rubber band or a beach ball held below water. Palantir was the opposite. The expectations were so high, they just couldn't deliver on those super high expectations. But don't get me wrong, Palantir's earnings report was great in terms of their guidance too. And Palantir is a key artificial intelligence play, in my opinion.